Robert Landry, welcome to the Corey story. This is awesome. I definitely wanted to line this interview up. How are you doing?
Doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So, to give everybody a little bit of an intro of who Robert Landry is, he's a staple to Woodbine racing as a jockey. He rode for 30 years. He had over 2,000 wins, which again, it trumps my not even close to that when I rode. He won tons of big races. He won every leg of the Triple Crown. He won the Queen's Plate, and it's just numerous. He was leading jockey and Sovereign Award winner 2 years in a row in the 90s. And just a real, when I was riding, he was the type of rider that I looked up to in a respectful sort of way, just because he dealt with his business properly, not like a wild bill sort of jockey thing. He treated his jockey business like a proper business, and I really aspired to that. I didn't really accomplish it when I was younger, but it was this is what I want to dive into, of just how you did things.
Good.
Anyways, let's talk about we'll get briefly into your career. Where did it all start?
Well, I mean, I was always a big animal lover and I always loved horses and that. And my dad used to go to the racetrack and, I uh, tag along with him. I just more or less to see the horses. My dad was just a $2 bettor. He really enjoyed the sport. He loved the animals and that. So I used to always go, and he had some friends that owned racehorses, and they kept saying, "Geez, you should be a jockey. You should be a jockey," because I was really small. And I think when I first started working on the racetrack, I weighed 78 pounds. And that's kind of how I got into it. I fell in love with the horses, and I got hooked up with a trainer, and in the mid '70s, and like I say, I just fell in love with it. I did I did finish school. I wanted to get my grade 12, so I'd work on weekends and through the summer holidays and that. And my last year, I did my stuff online just because I was getting closer to the age of being able to ride competitively. And I just wanted to make sure I'd have something to fall back on if, my career didn't take off. And, I was second guessing myself the first 10 years into my career. It was a bit of a struggle. Back when I started, we had contract holders, and, if, my owner, the guy that held my contract, owned two horses, didn't have a big stable of 40 or 50. So it was a bit of a struggle, but I think that benefited me in the long run. You get to appreciate, the hard work, and you get to learn a lot more. And, we didn't come from a whole lot growing up. My parents worked really hard to give us what they could, but, we were out working at a young age, just trying to make it. And I think when you do encounter struggles at an early age, it makes you focus a little bit more on, not that we didn't have everything we could have asked for. Our parents, gave us everything we wanted. We still, if we wanted the new in style jeans or something, we had to go out and work to be able to buy them, you
I
know?
think that goes for a lot of jockeys starting out. A lot of us didn't come from much, and a lot of us didn't
Yeah.
come from money and kind of struggled at the beginning, which kind of relates to what we're getting into. You said the contract work. Not a lot of people, I don't even totally understand it. So back in the 70s, how it used to be with the jockey, how did they get paid back then?
So we didn't get paid very good, to tell you the truth. We had contract holders, and you worked for that particular stable or that particular owner. And, if you rode for them, you'd get a 7 pound allowance instead of a 5 pound. You'd start with the 10, but then, for your contract holder, you'd get the seven. And, you know, we were getting maybe paid $50 a week if you got paid. I remember days um, I stayed at the trainer's farm. I won't mention his name because he's passed, and but I stayed at his farm, and some days he'd leave me at the track, and I didn't have any money, so I used to eat sweet feet and carrots just to have something to eat.
Oh my
But
God.
anyways, I mean, like I say, it probably helped me stay light, so I was able to ride. But I look back at those things and I laugh about it, and I think it's what made me who I am and help me be a bit of a fighter, because let's face it, being a jockey is not an easy job. I mean, I've seen
It's
all
very
kinds of
hard.
guys with tons and tons of talent that never got the opportunity. And like I say, it's a hard job. It's a hard way to make a living, and I don't, everybody sees a lot of the glamour, but they don't see, all the hard work that's put in. They don't see the danger involved and everything else. So I know I'm kind of going a little bit further away than where we were
No,
at,
no,
but
that's
I think people need to know that it's a difficult job.
so you started riding in 1981, is that what I read?
Yeah,
In Fort
yeah,
Erie? So
yeah.
back, yeah. And as it came along and the money got a bit better and you got a little more successful, do you remember like that first wow check like that came in? You're like, whoa.
Um, Yeah, I mean, listen, it took about 10 years to get, or a little more to get that first wow check, but it was tough making ends meet. I remember the very first car I bought was for $800. It was a used baby blue AMC Hornet, and I remember driving to Fort Erie. I used to take Jockey there to Fort Erie with me, and half the time the car was broke down on the side of the road, and we had to just let it sit there for a half an hour, and then we'd be able to start it and make it to Fort Erie. So we always had to leave early to make it there. But you know, like I say, at that time it wasn't a lot about the money. I loved what I did. I loved riding. Obviously you want it to be able to put food on your table, but like the one thing that I must say that I did do is I did listen to people that knew, and I had a lot of guidance along the way to help me, to teach me how to invest more. Like I
Can
understood
you
the
tell me who
value
that
of money.
was?
I understood the value of money in that, but it was later in my career, like maybe you know 10 to 12 years into my career, where just I was in the right place at the right time and met the right people, and they kind of gave me the confidence to be able to invest and do a little bit more than I did.
So
So
your good habits of that you had, like your money management habits, did they start back when in the early years when you're struggling, like just out of necessity? Did you come up with that sort of habitual stuff then,
well
or
I
did
yeah,
it develop later on
yeah,
when you met
well
those
I
other
was
people?
forced I was forced, like I say, the first 10 years of my career were a real struggle, and I was forced to be very frugal on anything, just because, I was basically living paycheck to paycheck, and some paychecks were not so good that, I was worried about how I was going to pay my rent or do something like that. But, I always managed. I always managed. And, I knew, you know, that back then we had the options of being in tack rooms and that before I started riding. Once you started riding, you weren't allowed to live in them, but you always had that option.
So as it continued and as your career increased, and you said people taught you how to invest money, what sort of things did you first invest into?
Well, no, yeah, no, they didn't really teach me. They made suggestions and they gave me the confidence to do those things. Like my first investments were property. The one thing that I think is very important, like obviously everybody has their own comfort zone and has their own opinions on what they want and where they want to end up. Obviously, the first and most important thing to me was to be able to get a roof over my head and to have a property, so if something ever happened, I had a place to live, and I had something that had some equity in it if push came to shove and I needed to do something. So my first thing was to buy a condo, and I'm going to tell you, I mean, I was really really scared at first, because when you work on commission, I was worried, am I going to be able to make my mortgage payments every month? So, I didn't buy my first place till probably the early 90s. And then, I was fortunate enough to get on a roll and ride good horses, and, was able to make more money. And then what I ended up doing was buying more properties, renting them out, and the tenants would pay for them. So at the end of my career, well, before the end of my career, I had properties that were paid for, that you have equity in. I was not like, really, I invested in that, and then I maxed out my RSPs every year. That's basically how what I did. I mean, obviously, yourself, real estate has really grown. And I mean, some of those places, I've had for quite a while now, and they've grown quite a bit.
And
So
so what you've created is this passive income. And now, did like when you had those properties in the early days, were they making money every month? Like, were you cash
they,
flowing at the
they,
end of the month?
well, not, I mean, I would say, they paid their bills. Like I didn't have to pay. I mean, I might have made a little bit on them all, but once I started doing really good, the government starts dipping their fingers in there too. So, but no, I never had to take anything out of my own pocket to make the payments. Like the tenants were paying for all those, and I always tried to be fair to my tenants as well. Um, so
Did anybody give you guidance on this when you were buying your
well, I'll
properties?
tell
Did
you.
you
I
have
mean,
someone?
I'll kind of tell you the story. What happened is, for a long, long time, I was struggling. And one day I was in the jocks room. Like, I just wanted to ride. I love to ride. And one day I was in the jocks room, and a jock took off a horse. A horse was like 99 to 1. No one wanted to ride it. And I was begging the people to ride the horse. I ended up riding the horse. The horse ran well. And the owners of the horse was Sue Leslie and her husband. And, so the next morning, Brian Campbell was training for them at the time. And the next morning, they said, you know what? You got to find that kid a live mount. He really helped out, and then helped us out. They were going to have to scratch the horse. And then they started riding me. And then they said, why don't you be our stable rider? And so I started riding all their horses, and it started giving me confidence. And like I say, I became friends with them, and to this day, Sue and I are very good friends. She's good friends with my family as well. So they really helped me. They really helped. They had successful businesses and that, and they really helped. They gave me the confidence to invest. Like, they said, don't worry, you'll be able to afford it. And if push comes to shove and you need a little bit of help, we'll help you. And I mean, everybody needs a leg up. And
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
that gave me the confidence to do it. I was afraid to do it at first, but it gave me the confidence. And, I'm forever grateful for them, doing that. And then obviously, um, I always did manage my money, and I always did try to, keep it organized. But as you start making more, you really, you really got to be cognizant of it, because you can spend it fast. Like, I didn't need to have a fancy car. I always had a nice car, but my priorities was to try and set myself up for the rest of my life for when I'm older, because I've seen a lot of athletes end up with nothing, and I didn't want to be one of those guys. And, you know, like I say, everybody has their own comfort zone. Everybody, it doesn't mean you need to save money and not do anything, and not enjoy your life. You need to do that as well. It's got to be a balance. But um,
So if we can dive back into what you were just saying just now about like how you did set yourself up and what you did, because what I notice is with lots of jockeys, and you said you struggled at the beginning. Whenever we struggle at the beginning, we are frugal by necessity. And as soon as we get a little bit of success, so many people do the same thing. I was guilty myself. Is as soon as you make more money, what do? You end up spending more money. So what sort of um, plans did you put in place as you made money? Did you have certain pools that you put your money? Did you have a certain amount that went towards this? Like, did you have a reserve fund? Did you have an emergency fund? Did you have an investment fund? Like, how did you categorize your money when you, at like, we would get our check on, I think it was Thursday. When you got that, were you figuring that out right there?
Yeah, well, after I paid my agent and my valet and anybody else I needed to pay, then, obviously when you work on commission, you'd sort all that out. But the big thing was, like I say, I made sure I could max out my RSPs every year. I wanted to do that. And still to this day, I try to do that. Pretty soon I'm getting to the age where I'm going to have to start taking it out. But, you know, when you're making a lot of money, it just, it defers the tax. And I think that's an important thing to do and start taking it out when you're in a lower tax bracket. But my main thing was to get a roof over my head and have a car. And then I had savings. And then, sometimes, obviously the last little while term deposits and that weren't the way to go, but sometimes if I just wanted to keep a little money on hand, just in case, you got hurt or something like that, I would put some of that in short term things. But for the most part, whenever I had extra cash, I would invest in another property.
Okay, perfect. I love that. So, did you have like an emergency fund? These are things that I'm getting into more now, trying to master my budgeting better. Of like, did you, because being a jockey and
Yeah.
being a jockey in Toronto, you ride 8, 9 months of the year and you don't ride for the other. Did you budget for those? Did you have a reserve fund for those months that you weren't riding?
Yeah, well, I rode all year round. I ended up going to Florida
Okay.
every year. So, but still, it cost me money to go down there. Um, but what I would do is I kept so much money aside so I could get it, because so many people that make investments, and you see them, they end up, needing money, and they have to liquidate, and they have to liquidate fast. And when they do that, sometimes they'll be losing money because it's, the market will be bad or what have you. So I always left, a good hunk. I always put aside at least something that would carry me for 3 or 4 months if something
Okay.
happened. And like I say, I never, I always had nice vehicles, but I never had to have the new Mercedes or the new, um, you know, Lamborghini or Porsche or whatever. I just, I
We
needed
all
something.
want it. We all do
Yeah,
want those
but
cars, but
but like I say, that wasn't for me. Like I'm a pretty simple guy. I did my job. I like to spend time at home. I did spend a lot of money on tools. I have a workshop and I enjoy
I
building
know that.
stuff. And you know, everybody jokes if Rob Landry doesn't have the tool, then they don't make it. But it's something that I really enjoyed, and yeah, some of the tools I have, they're nice tools, but it's something that I enjoy. I wasn't going to the bar drinking or wasting money that way. I was buying tools that still have some value to them. And I
That's,
was
you actually answered my one question. That's what it would have been. So your money crux would have been tools.
Yeah, I think tools, and like I say, I golfed when I was riding. I liked to golf. It's just kind of a relaxing thing, and it you get to go with a few buddies. But like I say, I mean, I wasn't, not that I didn't like hanging with some of the guys, but it's a business, and they're my peers and I respected them. But at the end of the day, the next day I had to go out there and compete with them, and it's a lot harder to compete with people when they're your friends.
Yep. It's very
And
hard.
so, like you said, I treated it like a business, and I have the utmost respect for jockeys. I having lived a life and seeing how difficult it is and how dangerous it is. Like I'm fortunate enough to, you know, end my career and be able to, I broke my back twice. I had some pretty serious injuries, and to be able to walk and come out and basically one piece, is a good thing. So, and that's the other thing, being in our business, you always have to worry about, insurance was very, very difficult to get. I did get extra insurance just because, the insurance that the jocks have isn't the greatest. So like I say, I mean, I tried
And
to, I tried to do as much as I could investment wise. Could I have been better? Probably. But I put myself in a pretty good position. When I retired, and then I was broached to do something else, and I wasn't in a position where I had to do it. I was, I so I'm able to do something that I like. I'm still around the horses, but it's not. I wasn't forced to have to do it,
Right.
which is a
Which
good thing.
a lot of jockeys, a lot of athletes that I
Athlete,
speak to.
yeah,
I spoke to a hockey player just recently, and it's life after sports is very, very hard to
yeah,
find yourself in what you want to do. And if you were making maybe a 6-digit income, most of us wouldn't be able to make a 6-digit income again, or at least we don't think we can. And so
yeah.
that mind block is there as well. If you could, if you were a jockey starting out now and you were doing fairly decent, how would you set yourself up financially? What plan would you have in place? Like, what could you tell the people that are starting out now of how to really control that money? Because most of them don't know how to deal with money, and because they never learned. None of us did, right?
Well, like I say, everybody is different. Everybody has, their comfort zones. But for me, the most important thing for me was to put a roof over my head and to pay for it. That was the most important thing, and that's probably what would be my goal again. And because if you own a property and it's, obviously they're getting a lot more expensive. I mean, let's face it. I mean, salaries are a lot larger too, but for an everyday person trying to start out to buy a home, a first time home buyer,
Yeah, it's very hard,
it's
especially for self-employed.
exactly it's difficult, and then sometimes, especially, some banks get a little nervous when you work on commission too, especially if you're going to have a large mortgage.
Yeah,
Um, So, like I say, that would be my first thing, and then, like I say, I would max out. I would max out my if I'm making a lot of money. I would max out my RSPs every year. I mean, some people play the market in that. I've never done that, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but it's a gamble as well. But there's benefits to having your money inside an RSP, especially when you want to defer taxes. When you're in the highest tax bracket, you're basically giving the government half your money.
yeah,
It's tough to
exactly.
swallow. So um, yeah, so they would be my first two things, and then, like I say, then I'd be looking to get obviously when you're working, especially as a jock, you need a reliable vehicle. They would be the first three things I would do.
So definitely like a Lamborghini Huracan.
Yeah, no, not happening. You know, I mean, if I had
Beautiful.
if I had unlimited funds, I wouldn't get one of those. I just, probably kill myself one.
Yeah,
But, to
and
me,
and
yeah, I don't
you
like to
you
be flashy.
you
I
were a
don't like.
Lincoln man, weren't you? Didn't you have a Lincoln
I
back in the
had
day?
actually Cadillacs. I had quite a few Cadillacs. I had a Lincoln for 1 year, but I was mostly I liked the Cadillacs, and I liked the Jeeps. I had a few Jeep Cherokees that I really really liked. So now I'm driving a truck. So
So now, and you've put yourself in a good spot. So now you're the general manager of Chiefwood Stables, which I think is amazing. I don't think they could have chose anyone much better, just based on how you treated your career, and that's going well.
it is going well. I mean, I really, really respect the owners and how they approach things, and I'm really grateful that I got to be associated with them. To be perfectly honest with you, I probably wouldn't do this for anyone else. Mr. Kremble is just a top class guy. He's very, very caring about the animals, as is the whole family. I mean, it's Stacy, his daughter-in-law, runs the retirement program, and Mark and Bob, are partners in Cheesewood. And like I say, it's just a great working relationship. I really, really respect them, and it's going well. We had a couple slow years, but I think things are back on track and looking for a real good year.
Beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate your time. This was a great talk. I could talk to you forever, but we'll cut it short because I'm sure you're busy. Um, yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to speak again one time.
Perfect. Great. Thanks for having me and hope all is well.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.